The following program will make you want to grow things and experience new and wonderful dreams about your plants, garden, and garden design. Listener participation is always strongly advised. Good evening and welcome to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101. To get on board, send us an email right now. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Down the Garden Path, where we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice for your plants, gardens, and landscapes. As landscape designers and gardeners, we think it is important and possible to have great gardens that are low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen. I am Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and owner of Down to Earth Landscape Design. I have been designing beautiful gardens and landscapes for homeowners east of Toronto for over a decade. And with me across Zoom is my co-host, Matthew Dressing. Welcome, Matthew.
Welcome, Joanne. Good evening, Gary. Good evening, everyone. I am Matthew Dressing, horticulturist and landscape designer and owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. Natural Affinity is a landscape design and garden maintenance firm servicing Toronto and the Eastern GTA. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting, relevant, and helpful topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from each other, from our research, and from the guests that join us here on the show. As always, we welcome your questions via social media, email, or phone call.
That's right. And we want to thank you and welcome everyone who's joining us live here while we record Down the Garden Path. You can always check out past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. We've been doing this for 3 years. 3 years today is our anniversary. This is our podcast anniversary. So we have a lot of content. We've been releasing these weekly pretty much, right, Matt?
That's right.
A few weeks where we skipped a holiday or two, but we want to welcome you, especially if you're a new listener. We have a ton of content. So search past shows of Down the Garden Path on your favorite podcast app. That you can access them on our websites as well. Mine is downtoearth.ca with the number 2. Matt, yours is
naturalaffinitydesigns.ca.
That's right. And you can also subscribe. So if you do it through the podcast app, you could subscribe, and you'll be notified when we do release new content. And of course, we would love you to please like, share, or leave us a comment. So welcome to Down the Garden Path, everyone.
That's right. That's right. What should we do our normal thing? How do we want to celebrate 3 years?
I know, 3 years.
Can you believe it?
I know. Well, we are continuing our month. We could segue to that. We are continuing our tree month, even though this is our 3rd year anniversary. We are continuing our tree month here in August. So, but we're just going to keep it general today and talk, because there's always lots of variety of questions for trees. So, so you guys can think about your questions and start emailing them in to us, your tree questions. In the meantime, I would love to know what's happening at the garden center.
You know what? It is today, in the last couple of days, we've been really busy. And it's not so much with buying the plants, although there people are still obviously doing that. But a lot of nematode questions are coming in, fall lawn care questions are arriving, all the spring, summer diseases and drought damages and other weird things that are happening in the gardens. People are
Yeah.
bringing in lots and lots of their questions. So it's
Ah,
been a very uh, hard goods kind of garden pharmacy typey kind of thing. So
okay. Okay.
yeah. But other than that, there's lots of hydrangeas still arriving in bloom, butterfly bush, roses of Sharon. There's some beautiful hollies that will have some fantastic red color. The fall annuals are rolling in. Lots of great perennials as well. So there's still lots to be had. There's still some good season yet to go. And then depending on where you are, you might see some sales already starting to pop up and end of year, end of season sales. So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So not too much. It's just kind of a steady
I like when
summer
you how
as you
you
get.
say that about garden pharmacy. So it becomes the garden pharmacy,
Yeah.
which is cool because yeah, people need help. And if I was to say what's going on in my garden, yeah, my grass is just toast. Oh my gosh, certain patches of it, I've got little bits of it that are looking great, but it's so small compared to the rest of it. Um, Japanese beetles, my neighbors are definitely being hit really badly. I had someone spray last year, and I'm going to have them do it again this year. Actually, Weed Man. They offer that service here in Ontario. If you are a regular Weed Man customer, and I know I was mentioning to you, I did some research with them
Yeah.
about the nematodes that they use are like a higher level, more specific nematode than what we can buy at the garden centers.
Mm.
So I thought that was really interesting. I think very similar to what the farmers must use. So yeah, so I definitely have noticed an improvement in my yard from doing that last year. Again, not with my grass, so I'm kind of rethinking that. What do I do there? But yeah. So there's definitely I need some pharmacy in my yard. That's for sure.
A little bit of garden pharmacy.
That's right. That's
Yep.
right. So yeah. So August that could be a show next August. Let's remember that. Let's be the garden pharmacy episode.
Garden pharmacy episode.
That's right. That's right. So, but it's been great talking about trees, and trees have been on people's minds, and unique trees. Native trees are very much in people's mind. I did want to shout out to a past organization that we've had on the show. They are based in Ontario, so leaf.org, leaf.org. They are an urban native tree promoter organization here, and we had Janet on in the past. You can search our podcast app for an urban forest episode. But they are having. I'm going to pull it up here. They're going to do the month of September as their tree month, all about trees. So they are actually doing. Let me read it here to everybody. New event alert: discover over 35 species of trees native to the Greater Toronto Area through a four-part webinar series. New trees presented each evening, so don't miss your chance to meet our city's trees. Register on their website. So they're on Instagram at leaf_org. And so check that out, or check out their website for more information. So that's happening starting September 1st. So September 1st, 3rd, 8th, and 10th. They're going to have four webinars: small deciduous trees, large deciduous trees, conifer trees, and non-native trees. So I'm assuming that's going to be like our Japanese maples that we talked about last week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so
There's
yeah, so
good
I think
presentation.
I saw that today on Instagram and really wanted to support them because I think it's a great organization. At the time, they were not servicing my community, but they are now. They've just recently announced that they're doing all of Durham region. So they have volunteers come out and kind of assess your yard and what native trees and shrubs might you benefit from. And it's a very nominal fee for them to do that and for them to plant a very small, albeit small, native tree in your yard. So yeah, so it's an interesting service, and it's a great way to encourage people to plant native trees. So yeah, so Matt, where'd you go?
Oh, there I am.
There you are. Whew. Okay.
There-
So yes, so please check that out if you are. And I would assume, I know it's based on the Greater Toronto area, but I would assume if you're interested in trees and you're outside the Greater Toronto area, that you still would be able to have access to that information. So
And
yeah.
what was the website one more time, just for our listeners?
You know what? The website is not listed on here. It link and profile. Hold on. Da-da-da. I didn't go to the profile. On Instagram, it's leaf_org. So, and I
And I
was
think
looking
I
at
was trying to load it or search for it, and I timed
and
out.
you couldn't find it. Yeah, and I was looking on it on the computer instead of on the phone. You know how the phone one doesn't cooperate. But so we would love your tree questions if you have them while we search this out. We would love to hear from our listeners for some tree questions, some planting advice, anything like that, right, Matt?
That's right. And it's not a trick question, but John has written in and says, "Hello, Joanne and Matthew. Congrats on 3 years of the podcast. Wow, I've been listening to them for that long? Question mark. They are
Oh,
fantastic. Here's to another 3 more years. Love the show, John."
well, thank you, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you
And for
very
our
much.
listeners, it's yourleaf.org. So www.yourleaf.org. But thank you, John. Yeah, 3 years that we turned. So it was a radio show before that, and we turned it into a podcast 3 years ago. So we've been uploading those shows as a podcast. Yeah,
Wow.
I know. I know. Trying to remember our first guest. I think it was Helen Battersby talking about shade gardens. So anyway, I know, but it's been
Holy
fun.
moly.
It's been very different that Matt and I are no longer in the studio. It's been how many months of that since March, right? That
Yeah,
we've not been in the studio together. We're both recording from our homes, but it's been cool too. So yeah, so we don't get to see Gary, and he won't turn his camera on, so we can't see him.
Yes.
But he gets to hear us still every week. So thanks everybody.
that's right.
And we love the themes. We hope we've gotten some really good feedback. We hope you did and you enjoyed them too, right? That we've had the monthly themes every month. We're still fine tuning October's theme, aren't we, Matt?
We are.
September's theme. September's theme.
September's theme.
That's right.
September's theme.
That's right.
So
Um, yeah.
that's right. Jack has written in. He writes in, "Hello, Joanne and Matthew. It's been really hot lately, and I'm just wondering if it is too hot to be planting a tree right now with all this 40-degree, I'm going to convert from Fahrenheit maybe, weather. Is it still safe to plant a tree, or should I wait until later in the fall? Thank you, Jack." So we've been planting trees. We're still okay for planting trees. We're still selling lots of trees. Yeah, Jack, you can definitely plant your tree. One of the tips, because of the soil, it has been very hot outside. So one of the things that I've been saying to the people I've been talking to is dig your hole and leave it overnight as well, so that the soil can cool out, the air can circulate. If we get a nice overnight rain, just to relieve some of that heat, and then plant your tree. So just as deep as the soil is in the pot, or twice, and just a little bit wider. Backfill with some of your native soil and mix in some new soil, and then just do that first thing in the morning instead of in the middle of the hot day. Just it's nice and cool in the root zone, and it can just warm up naturally. And then just make sure that you are keeping it well watered. We have had a few people, or I've had a few people coming back that they haven't been watering their trees deep enough with all this heat. So just make sure you're watering it nice and deeply. If you know that it's been dry or it's been that hot and it is drying out, just make sure you give it a really good soak. Just make sure that the water isn't pooling in the tree and running away. You want to kind of have it pool and then very quickly absorb and soak into that root zone, and come back again 5 to 10 or 15 minutes later and just give it another soak. That second water will bond to the water that's re-wet the drier soil, and that's what the tree will really take up.
Okay.
And Joanne, of course, Jack, if you're a regular listener, Joanne is always talking about the wonderful tree gators or the tree bags. These are fantastic. Check your local garden center. And it's, what is it, 15 liters? I should know by the number of times you talk about it and the
Yeah.
fact that I sell
Or
them.
I was going to say, or more so the fact that you sell them, but
Right?
okay.
But they're great. You fill them with 15 liters of water. They wrap around and zip up the trunk of your tree, and then just over that 7 to 9 hours, depending on which one and the make and the size you get, it just slowly feeds nice all that water down into the root zone, so it's evenly moist and cool. Yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect. So you said to dig the hole and leave it empty for a day to let the temperature, if you can. I
if
mean,
you can. If you can, yeah, you might not be able to, or it might be in a spot there where it's unsafe. If you have children, or there's a
mhm.
walkway, or there's traffic
Yeah,
nearby, it
yeah,
might be unsafe.
yeah.
But if you
Yeah,
could
and if you're
safely do it,
and if you're paying someone to do it for you, they're not going to do that. So,
no,
yeah,
no,
but I think those are the situations where then you definitely invest in a tree bag. And I've noticed some
yeah,
of my contractors, when I started kind of insisting for the jobs that I do with them, for them to have a tree bag, then I've seen them post pictures of jobs that I haven't been involved in, but they have a tree bag. So I'm like, woohoo, that's good.
she's
So,
spreading.
hmm
We'll get those tree guys on those tree gators on soon.
that's right. That's right. So, yeah.
So thanks again, Jack, for your question. We've got three J's in a row. We've got Josh, who's written in. Congratulations on your 3 years of podcasting. Love all of them. Such fantastic information. Question: can I prune my trees now here in Toronto with the rain we had? A bit of relief for the trees. So a good time. I have some maples. Thank you. Yeah. Um, Depending on which tree you have, Josh, and you do have some maples, then yes, you can. So just in general, just make sure you know which trees you do have before anybody just runs around and starts pruning. But yeah, late summer, you can start pruning some of the maples. The sap is as a very slow moving, if at all, right now. So you could do some removing of your limbs. There's a number of different techniques. Make sure that if you can't do it by hand, there is a proper 3 point technique to remove thicker limbs from your tree, just so that it doesn't, the weight doesn't pull off the bark and strip beyond your cut. And then just make sure, Josh, that when you do prune, whether it's a large branch from a tree or a small branch from a tree or a shrub, there's always that, especially on trees, the branch collar. So it's that kind of crinkling of cells around where the branch erupts from the trunk. It's designed to activate at the removal of the limb, and that's what creates that knot as it swells and it expands and the cambium grows again to take in that little removed limb. And so you don't want to damage that, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so
Okay.
you should be able to do that all right.
Excellent.
I was really sad. They just on the street where I live, there's a little roadway parking plaza kind of thing just up the way, and there were these big, beautiful globe maples that they had, and they had almost made like a hedge. They had been planted all, and they kind of blocked the view,
Oh,
and
yeah?
the plaza came and just took them all down, just removed everything. Yeah,
Really?
they removed everything, and all they did was drop a piece of armor stone beside each where each of the trunks were, and planted like two boxwoods. And I'm like, what? My beautiful tree row.
How is that
Yeah, it
even
was.
possible? Because that would be city property.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much on city property. I don't know if maybe the city did do it. There is a bus stop in the middle of or along that row, but yeah, it was sad. It was like five really nice, big, beautiful maples, and they put a lot of work into them. And they had pruned them and kept them really healthy. They were stunning. No diseases. They didn't get any tar spot or powdery mildew, and now they're just gone. So it's
Really?
kind of sad.
Yeah, that just seems shocking.
Yes.
Considering homeowners can't do that.
Yeah, really, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, Kim has written in. She says, kudos on 3 years for the podcasts. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thanks,
And
Kim.
thank you, Josh, if I didn't say thank you to Josh. Is your website again? Where can we listen to them? So, Kim, you can find me in the link to the podcast on www.naturalaffinitydesigns.ca. And Joanne, we can find you at.
downtoearth.ca with the number 2. But also, if you have a podcast app on your phone, then you can search Down the Garden Path on your podcast app. Most phones come with one, or you can, Google another one. Um, and you can kind of search Down the Garden Path, and we should come up, and you can kind of scroll through 3 years of content. Woohoo!
Right.
But on our website, the advantage of our websites is that you will have the 3 years of the podcast, but then you also have the 3 years of radio shows, which are a little bit older, but a lot of our content is, very evergreen, very seasonal, and we've had some really great guests and authors and topics and specialists in the past. So yeah.
That's right.
Hmm.
Yes. So lots of great content there. And thank you, Kim, for your question.
Yeah.
Um, and my head is totally gone blank.
Oh, do we have another question?
We don't.
Ah,
Anyways.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So talking about
Uh-oh.
my yard being garden pharmacy. So this is coming up for me and a lot of people, primarily on Japanese maples. So I'll just say that even though we talked about them last week, but like a variegation in the leaf. Like I'm assuming it's connected to the stress, but a variegation in the leaf, a little bit of crispiness on the edges. Leaf color is kind of distorted, both on my yellow one as well as my burgundy one. And I've noticed it on neighbors' cut leaf ones as well. So is it just a moisture thing? What, do you have any,
Mm,
hmm.
yes. I think I know the conversation you were talking about before. But yes, in the garden center and around my neighborhood as well, there have been a few. We're finding the heat stress, especially in some of the larger, more established trees. We've had that little hot period where it was 40 degrees plus, a lot of
Hot,
sun.
yeah.
Right, and they were not getting enough water, so they were getting crispy. And then the taller ones weren't able to move enough water up to the tops, so they were shading themselves and reducing it, but they couldn't get more up. So some of them you'll see will lose some of the top or upper leaves, or they can go kind of like what you were saying, where they're just kind of crispy on the edge. We're getting that in the garden center as well, and it is just that heat and that little bit of drought stress, especially around the top. The variegation that you mentioned, is it more of like, are you thinking, or visually, is it more of like a nutrient deficiency, like a nitrogen,
It looks like it,
or
and I think I was thinking it was either iron or nitrogen. I mentioned the gypsum to you that someone had, that I'd had a specialist come in and look and said that I needed some, that would help amend my soil.
right?
But I didn't get the actual deficiency that the gypsum was going to help. But now I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Mhm. No, and you know what? You and I looked that up, and I think we were saying that it's the, um, what was it? Was the calcium and one of the other nutrients that bond to the soil heavily when salts collect in the soil. So it lets them go off of the soil so the other nutrients can bond. So some of the
Oh,
lighter
okay.
nutrients that can rebond so that the plant has access again to them.
Okay.
And I'm going to totally forget it, but I will see if I can look it up.
Okay.
So it might be that, but I was wondering more of the coloring, because even ours as well in the garden center, and some of them more the cut leaf than the broadleaf, the palmatum types, more the dissectum types.
Hmm.
They have like a white streak down the middle. Are yours? Do you have any of the dissectums that are doing that?
I don't have that. I mean, I do even have some variegation that does definitely look like nutrient deficiency, but even in my limelights, and in the past, I felt like it was an iron deficiency, but it just doesn't make sense, really. So yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if anybody else out there. I have heard that because that yes, the heat stress was impacting it, but also that we went so quickly from cold to hot that it wasn't they weren't able to build up that store of moisture when it got as hot as it did. So
Mm-hmm.
that was they were just such new, and especially the cut leaf, the dissectum, like you said, are so fragile that if they didn't get the moisture going, which is tricky because in the spring you don't often think about watering, especially when we're still getting some spring rains and slightly cooler temperatures, that type of thing. But I think that's a really, get out our tree bags. I think that's a lesson learned, that we need to get out our tree bags earlier next year and not wait until they're already stressed, right? Try to prevent it.
Yes. And yes, exactly. Yes. And sorry, just going back to the gypsum, it is the calcium, the magnesium levels that it plays within the soil.
Okay.
And yeah, so just makes those other larger ones, other atoms available for that nutrients. Yes. So also with the nutrients deficiency with the watering, what happens in the garden centers too is because especially the thirsty ones in the heat, we tend to give extra water just to keep it nice and moist and hydrated. But every
Okay.
time you water the soil, you're dissolving some of those nutrients off the soil, so that they're available to the plant. But as the water pushes down, you can actually start to wash away and leach some of those extra nutrients out
Mm.
of that root zone as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I know in the garden center, especially being in containers, we will see some nutrient deficiencies that way,
Mm-hmm.
because we just don't, they're just in grower soil and that kind of thing. So just adding that food and just kind of keeping an eye for sure. Oh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Okay.
so we have a,
So it is good to know that there's some things that we can do.
right.
Um,
Yeah, that we
Not
can,
necessarily that yeah, they're not necessarily going to save this season, but that and that it's not that the tree is dying. That there is some deficiencies, there is some water stress. Applying extra water, making sure the tree has. I think the best thing you could do, really, not fertilizing it. Right, we don't want anybody fertilizing it right
right.
now, because we don't want to encourage a ton of new growth as the tree starts to prepare for winter. But I think those slope deep waterings to make sure that the tree has enough resources to get through the winter.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. And a lot of people come in, they're scared because the tree is showing some sort of sign or some sort of stress. Yeah. And they won't die from it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I know you're keeping me up. I don't know why I'm yawning. I'm sorry. Ratted myself out there. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what else is going on?
Well, Mick has written in and he says, "Hi, fantastic 3 years. When planting trees, should we add anything to the soil like peat or peat moss, etc.? Thank you." I advise the people who come and see me at the garden center about the planting of the trees is to not make the hole too sweet with a different soil that's from your garden bed. Because roots are smart and can detect gravity and they're used to spinning around in a pot. And if you make it too sweet and there's such a difference, and you see this in sod too, because sod will take so long to interface with the new soil. But they tend to will stay and gain most of the roots in that little bit of brand new soil before they start to burst out beyond. So you can amend the soil mix with some good soil, especially if you've got like a really clay or really sandy or silty soil. Adding some organic matter like a peat moss or peat or compost or something like that will definitely help. But also mix in some of that native soil that you've excavated from the hole, so that those roots can recognize that there's a little bit of a mixture here. There's a little bit of a tougher soil. I can adapt to it, and then they'll push out, and they get the edge of that hole, and then there's a whole wall of this kind of soil. But I know how to deal with that because I've seen it when I was younger, and they can move through. It's just a more of an adaptation type thing
Okay.
that makes it a little easier.
Now, what about adding mycorrhizae fungus,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good and beneficial fungus that kind of attach. So we've had Root Rescue as another product that we've had on the show. Bob Reeves a few years ago as well, which was a great episode. And I'm hearing more and more positive. I know my friend Nancy is a landscape designer. Every plant she plants, um, she uses Root Rescue. She's moved some really like as well-established plants and well-established Japanese maples. She's convinced homeowners and contractors to relocate them in a better spot in the yard, and she just swears by it. And I don't think she plants really without it. It is
Yeah.
a little, I do have to say, I kind of lazy, in the way that it's by the watering can. And so sometimes if it's a really big tree, you've got to apply it a few times to the roots, and you want to put it in the hole and then make it come into contact with the roots as you're planting. So it's not something you could add after the hole has been filled. So that, there's a window. What is your opinion? Or, I think that's something, I don't see the harm in it for sure.
No, and I think as the science says, if when you look into it, there's those natural funguses in the soil, fungi in the soil, anyways, that are going to do that, especially depending on the species that do different ones and do different, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I definitely think there's merit to all of that, and the idea is that those fungal spores, those mycelial networks, can reach into a much finer point in the soil to drop additional nutrients and even more water that the normal root hairs can't quite get.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think definitely it's worth doing, worth trying out, especially if you're like Nancy's been moving some bigger things.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Bob had some great examples on that episode of some successes. But oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so our listeners can check it out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely there's a few products. Root Rescue is a product here in the GTA. Is it similar? I know Mikey sold a product as well. Is it similar?
It's similar. It works the same way, but I believe Mike has three or five of the bigger species of the fungi.
Okay.
But Root Rescue, I believe, has up to 17 and
Okay.
has some
Okay.
of the smaller outside species that do a little bit more for the
Hmm.
soil than just the
Hmm.
main three. Just a
Yeah,
bit
I
more of a
mean,
balance.
I think there's just schools of thought that, um, the mycorrhizas really help the roots get established.
Yeah,
And whereas fertilizers, things like, transplant fertilizers, adding compost, adding bone meal, that type of thing. Don't really see anybody really using peat moss that much anymore, but actually adds more of a like fertilizer. Well, the tree's too busy trying to get established to really start growing. Like, you know what I mean? So that's kind of the, you know what I mean? The goal is to get the plants established, the roots. And I'll say that to a lot of people, even with their garden, like they're so worried about what the plant looks like above ground
yeah,
in the first season. Now with some Japanese beetle issues on newly planted things, I try to reassure everybody, like, yes, it's unfortunate. Yes, it's very cosmetically damaging, but the goal right now is to get the roots established. And then next season we can deal with everything else.
yeah. Yes, exactly. I always equate a healthy root system to healthy organs in our bodies. If we have healthy organs, we're overall we're just happier. Same with the plants. But a nice point about the fertilizer, because the part with the mycorrhizae fertilizer or mycorrhizae amendment was that if you start to artificially fertilize your plants um, with the mycorrhizae attached, it's a symbiotic relationship. So if you start using synthetic fertilizers in your plantings to water those plants, trees, shrubs, that the mycorrhizae will disconnect from the roots because the tree is able to get large amounts of the synthetic fertilizers with ease. If they don't rely on feeding, because the tree will feed carbohydrates into the mycorrhizae, so they can grow and multiply. And then in turn, they return other nutrients, trace nutrients, and other elements to the tree. So if you over fertilize synthetically, they will disconnect and they'll go dormant and they'll wait there until they
Mm-hmm.
reconnect back to the tree. So you can kind of disconnect. So if you do go mycorrhizal way, Bob was saying, I believe that you have to fertilize more organically, and you can't use those synthetic, instant like Miracle Grow type fertilizers that just make all that food just so abundant in the soil in the root zone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of that was Mick's
Yeah,
question
that was a
about
long answer.
yeah. So hopefully Mick that helped. But definitely check out root because I think it's just rootrescue.com or ca. Um, and there's a lot of great information that Bob and I forget the other young man that was working with him, his name too, but they were great. They have a great product. I actually had just got some pocket samples some little samples. So I have yet to try those out on my balcony. I'd like to run an experiment where I have one window box with them and another window box
Oh,
without them.
yeah. And
Yeah.
excellent. So it's actually rootrescue.com.
The calm, okay.
And it does look like that. Yeah, they've got a root rescue store locator. You can buy now. They have an online store, and yeah, mycorrhizal science. So lots of information
Yes.
there.
Nan has written in. Nan says, hi, all. Hi. All of us here in London, Ontario, love your show. We take your advice all of the time. Do you guys have a book out for information? Thank you very much for the podcast, as we have used them for reference several times for our gardening needs. You rock. The rock stars of gardening, Joanne and Matt. Garden on. Thanks. And thank you, Nan. That's awesome. I'm
Yeah,
glad you
that's
guys
great.
all enjoyed the show. Yeah, Nan. I'm still twisting and poking the box with Joanne about a book. So
Yes, poking. Yes.
down the garden path, and I don't know what it would be. I don't
About.
know. What kind of book would you want to read about, Nan? Would you want kind of like the podcast where it's just kind of different topics, or would you want like a specific topic? I'm not sure. I'd love your input because I keep kind of trying to pitch
Yeah,
something for
I'd
Joanne.
love yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what we could write that isn't out there already, kind of thing. So I think that's my thing. So.
Yeah, I worry about that too sometimes when I go to write a
Mhm.
blog post for the website. It's like, well, what am I going to do that you guys can't Google already, or that I haven't covered in the podcast with you?
I know. And what we even say, even with our themes, we thought we kind of came up with that because we didn't know what else to talk about that we haven't already talked about.
Yeah.
And then we were able to find, based with the themes, really do some deep dives into some other things. So it's been really cool. But now it's like, okay, what do we do next year? We kind of keep to top ourselves. So that's kind of one thing.
So, what would help you next, Nan, at all? Yeah. So, yes. So, thank you for your question. Thank you for all the support. And thank you to everybody who's written in and those who haven't even written in. Thank you so much for tuning in every week, whether you listen to the live show or you listen to the live show on the podcast. Thank you very much. We love doing it and we love meeting every Monday night and trying to bring you cool, interesting, and helpful topics to help you in your garden. And I think it's a labor of love that Joanne started a long time ago and sucked me into, and
Yep.
I love it just as much. So thank
Yeah,
you.
for
And
sure, for sure. And we would love, as much as we love listening to the questions and everybody here, please remember, we'll, pause the show to say we do have a Facebook group. It would be, it's a great place to meet us and kind of chat with us more. If you search Down the Garden Path podcast on Facebook, as well as Down the Garden Path podcast on Instagram. So we'd love those communities. That's a great way for you to share, like when we post about the show, for you to share with your friends, kind of spread the word about our podcast. Because sometimes I feel like, as much as I feel like we've talked about so much and there's so much information out there, I realized, and I think even with the pandemic, there's a lot of new gardeners and a lot of
there is.
people, and there is, as much as you could quote unquote Google things, there's a lot of misinformation. So I think information that might not work for you,
Right.
because the world is a big place and the World Wide Web is even bigger. So just because what comes up in your feed says to do this, it doesn't mean that that's the best thing for you in your area. So especially for people within the Greater Toronto Area, Ontario, or Zone 5, that we can, because I know there's a lot of US. Zone 5 covers a lot of the US as well. Matt, I really tried to give you the accurate information for you. And I know we've got lots of listeners on the West Coast, and we're very quick to say this might not apply to you. Look in your area. So I think that's our biggest gift, is we really want to provide as accurate as possible, as timely information as possible, and whether it's through the podcast or the Facebook page and the Instagram account, we love doing that.
That's right.
I'll stop talking now.
All right. Well, Ralph has written in about a tree. He says, do we really need to mulch a new tree? Does it really do anything? If so, what? what would be the best mulch as well. Thank you. So, do we really need to mulch a tree? Um, yes and no. Most street trees will do it. The idea really comes down to, does it really do anything? And yes, it does. So what it's going to do is, Ralph, it's going to protect the soil from the sun and the wind and the heat. So it's going to reduce the stress, the heat stress from the roots, the drought stress as the sun and the wind and the elements kind of dry out that root zone and that surrounding soil. So if it stays cooler, and it'll stay moist more long or longer for a longer period of time, allowing it to have more water, which reduces its stress and just kind of keeps it cool, healthy, happy, allows it to kind of focus on getting those roots in and establishing and keeping her going. So you don't have to technically know, but it does help in the way that it just reduces the elemental stresses and any other factors that might affect the root zone. Another thing, 2 to 3 inches of mulch is a great barrier against weeds. Not to say that it's going to prevent weeds permanently 100%. However, the weeds have a very porous 2 to 3 inches of material of loose mulch to hang out in. So some of them will germinate and root in, but they're exceptionally easy to pull out because they haven't anchored themselves into some solid soil underneath. So mulch also will do that as well. What would be the best mulch? Ooh.
Well, I think just a natural, like cedar,
Yeah,
composted pine, steering away from the dyed mulches. We've had shows in the past about those
that's
that
what I was.
really
Oh
it's
yeah,
not the best quality wood for or material. The idea is to add something organic, right?
right.
And we're talking, and also I want to just a word about mulch volcanoes. So there's mulching your tree, and then there's mulching your tree. So I'm sure you've all seen the mulch volcanoes. So that's when we say, mulching a new tree, you really want to do it carefully. And you can Google that. There are lots of great examples that the mulch should be spread out. It should not be, 6 inches up the trunk. You want to see the root flare of the tree, right? The trunk flare.
Yeah, remember how when we were all kids and we used to draw trees, and it was just that big
Oh,
cloud and the trunk, and then those little like teeth or feet on the bottom?
yes, or like just that smooth. We always drew that. I know. I always drew those like that
Yes,
curves at the bottom, right? The tree always curved at the bottom. It wasn't like a telephone pole,
right.
So yes. So the kids nowadays, I think, draw the telephone poles because they're stuck in mulch
Yeah.
volcanoes. So none of that.
If the kids draw, they don't just like Google a picture of a tree and
That's true.
no,
That's true.
that's not giving them enough credit. But yeah. So just watch those mulch volcanoes. Yeah, and then you just have to mulch out to the edge of the hole that you've dug if you just want to mulch that specific tree. You don't have to go too deep and make that big volcano. And your did you give me a no? Okay.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Nope. Nope. It's
Looked
perfect.
like Joanne had another thought there, Ralph. So
No,
that was
no,
all.
it's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that answers your question about mulching trees. Yeah, definitely. And if you decide to mulch your tree, Ralph, and do something like your tree bag or just watering your tree regularly, the water from the tree bag and your regular watering will penetrate the mulch and go right through as well. If you have to fertilize something with your mulch on it as well, if you've got mulch already on your garden bed, a lot of people will ask, well, do granular fertilizers or like do fertilizers still work? And yes, they will if you decide to artificially, like you're not doing a compost or you have a composted mulch like the composted pine needles or fir needles. I think that one of our local places give out. It's already starting to break down the prills, the granular fertilizers. When it comes into contact with water, it will dissolve and water through the mulch and enter the water system. Same thing with your Miracle Grows or your other water soluble fertilizers. They will water through the mulch. They will travel with the water, so you
Okay.
can water and feed through the mulch as well.
Excellent. Excellent. A question for you. Poplar trees. Do you have an opinion or no opinion?
You know, I do like them. They're very quick growing. I love their smooth
Mm,
silver barks. I
mhm.
love the tiny leaves and they flicker kind of like
Yeah,
jazz hands in the
I don't
wind.
remember seeing them in the nursery. Like of all the years I worked in the nursery, like do you guys sell them?
Right. And so I like them because they're such a big, and they used to be a classic like windbreak along fields because they're so quick
Hmm.
growing. And then I think there was a big thing about it becoming like a weed tree, and it grows so fast and then you get a storm and it just comes down. So, and then they were just so big. And then the urban environment became smaller and smaller. So we have had a few of them, just a popular, populus tremuloides, the trembling aspen or poplar. But outside of that, we haven't had very many
Okay.
cultivars.
Okay.
And I haven't heard of anything really smaller or a little bit more for the urban landscape, if you will.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, I've just been seeing them. They've just come up in the last couple of weeks, on Instagram, and people that, I mean, they it takes them a while to get, like, they're tall and skinny. And then I know people have said, the one homeowner said, well, I'll be gone when those become an issue, that kind of
yeah,
thing. But she had a really tall house get built next to her, and she wanted something that was fast growing and that would screen the house. And actually, you know what she had done? It was like an enclosed bed, and at the base of it was actually goutweed. So they controlled the
oh,
goutweed, and it was it was a ground cover of like 5 poplars, and the silver and white, or the green and white, the silver of the bark,
yeah,
looked really good. And it was kind of surrounded, so the goutweed had nowhere to go. It was, patio was all around it. Um,
great.
but they certainly did provide, they're not, because some of the other columnar trees that are popular right now, like beeches and things like that, do tend to be slower growing and slower to get established. Pyramidal oaks, some of our favorite columnar trees, where these were, had only been in a few years and really had gotten to be quite the height.
They're great. Yeah, because I think even just the straight um, the trembling aspen, the poplar tremuloides, it's only like 30 to 40 tall by like 10 feet wide. And then that golden fall
Mm-hmm.
color, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm not too sure why they've fallen out. There's like the balsam poplar tree. It's an American hardwood. It's great for more wet spots. Hardy zone 3 to 9. Um, yeah, there's some great little ones that are around. Um, yeah, so I'm not
Good.
too sure why they've fallen out of.
Okay.
And I wonder if any of our listeners, do you guys use poplar trees? Do you love poplar
Mm-hmm.
trees, or do you have another tree that you like to use as a screening that maybe the birch, oak, hornbeam, emerald, cedar kind of group we're
Yes.
missing?
Yes, I
Um,
mean, they're none of them are perfect, right? They all have a
no,
little, tweak to them, or so they're not all none of them are perfect, but some are better for situations than others.
yeah,
And I think the popular is another aspect of it. And both of the people that I have spoken with lately about them, and both of them who posted them in their gardens, were also landscape designers. So they definitely loved the positive features of the lovely foliage and the lovely bark, and
yeah,
that just how quickly they became a screen.
yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, I remember at college we had the greenhouses, and there was a little back vineyard, and then there was this massive, I don't even know how many 100 feet long thing
Yeah.
it was. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think our listeners might not even know because they're not being put into yards, but they probably see them in the forests. Like you see them when you're
Yes.
driving in the country, and things like that. So that's one of the things I think that's so different, is that you see them in nature. So would they be native? Would they count as native trees?
There are some Native
Okay.
American or North American, just kind of trying to get everybody. But
Yeah.
there are some, yeah, that are for sure native to the continent. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
you've
good.
got some beautiful native trees that you could be using.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, as we hit the last 10 minutes of our
Hmm.
trees, questions, and answers episode celebrating 3 years of Down the Garden Path podcast, we've got a couple more questions coming in. Sean has written in. Hello, Joanne and Matthew. Congratulations on your 3 years of podcasts. That really is amazing. Was it Bartlett Tree Care that you had on your show in the past? I need an arborist, and I thought those are the folks that you recommend.
Hmm.
Thank you for your advice.
Excellent. Yes, and because that's almost like a lead into next week's show there.
Right?
But yeah, so we definitely recommend. We've had Mark on a couple of times, And we definitely recommend giving them a call. Please let them know that you heard about them here on the Down the Garden Path.
That's right. And I was just quickly looking. Yeah, it's bartlett.com for you, Sean. So you can reach them through there.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And we're actually going to have a repeat episode of one of our conversations with Mark on the show next week, because we are actually taking the week off, unbeknownst to Gary. Gary,
By the way,
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So that we've been going straight, Mark, Gary. We've been really good.
Excellent.
Excellent. So there you are, everyone. So that was perfect, Sean. Perfect little segue for us.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And a shout out to the arborists. They really they know their trees. They love their trees. They know all the different ways to protect our trees. So even if you're not in our area, and Bartlett Trees is in the U.S. as well as Canada, so reach out to them if you are in their area at bartlett.com. They are the last, like if they can save the tree, they're going to want to save the tree. They're very different than calling someone just to trim a tree or cut down a tree or be concerned about a tree. They definitely want to look after the tree.
Most definitely. And you'll really enjoy. Tune in next week if you didn't get to hear Mark talk. He's fantastic and he had lots of information. I think both of us learned a couple things from Mark easily that episode. So, yeah, most certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve has written in. Hello, Joanne and Matt. You just answered your question regarding writing a book. The show is a book. All of the information that you teach us, put in a book. Everything about anything has already been in a book anyway. There's really not a lot of new subjects. The key is putting your advice, tips, and tricks in your own words in a creative way that your readers would like. Just like your radio show.
Is that Steven? Is that Steven? Like our Steven Biggs or no?
Steve, no.
No, it's not. Okay.
Stephen E. We listen every week regardless. If you give us similar information that is out there. It's the knowledge and the entertainment that you do for us. So write it. Congrats on 3 years of podcasts. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes. Thank you for the advice about the book and the congrats.
Yes.
You've inspired me.
No, I'm like, how do I?
No.
Excellent. Well, we'll think about it.
Yeah, I'll think about it more, and then I'll twist her arm some more. So what's gonna happen? Yes, I feel bad about writing a book by myself about the stuff that we had on the show.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that.
I couldn't do that.
Wow. Oh, where'd you go? There you are.
Oh, I'm cutting in and out.
There you go.
So, congratulations, Joanne.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming along this ride with me. And, I've said when I've explained to people about the podcast, I'm like, yep, I realized early on, and this is my thing, that I feel like I'm a better talker than writer. So I feel like that's, I found my niche. And I think of all the teachers, all my school years growing up that, put me in the corner with my face facing the wall because I was too busy always chatting with my fellow classmates that, hey, look at me now, I'm talking. so yeah,
practice.
That's right. So anyway, so I'm glad that everybody enjoys it, and we really do enjoy doing it. So that's great, and we do love our themes, and love that we've been able to do a deeper dive in trees. I know we toyed with I know we've got a few minutes left. We toyed with talking about some small trees, but both you and I kind of felt like, okay, could that carry through the whole show? But I just wonder, do we have a couple of suggestions for small trees? Now that I put you on the spot, don't you love that?
Yes, because I was totally reading something else from someone else. From another listener.
Another question? Oh, okay.
Yeah, everyone, I'm just kind of thinking back to work as well in the garden center. Everyone wants this magical tiny tree. I think a lot of the smaller trees, some of them just I think they're just older fashioned trees. Like there's a whole group of smaller cherries and some crab apples, but they
Mm,
produce some food or some fruit of some sort.
yeah.
So they're
Yep.
gorgeous, but and they fit the dimensions that they want. Um, but yeah, and what about defining a small tree? So what would you
Yeah.
consider
It's
small,
true.
right? If you get really dwarf, you're like 5 to 7 feet tall, maybe
Mhm.
8 tall and wide. Semi-dwarf is your 12 to 15, and then you go up from there.
Yeah.
Um, Ivory silk lilacs are still super popular
Yes, they
in the
definitely
garden
are.
center.
Where I was, where I saw the poplars, where also they had a Japanese. She had a Japanese snowbell,
Oh,
styrac. I'm just gonna look it up. Yeah, and so it's cool. It had little balls on it that were. She said they kind of glowed in the dark at night. So it was spring flowering. It was a really nice sized tree. She said they were really hard to get where we are, and she just loved it, and it was kind of behind her water feature that she had lit up. And so she said, you could, when we were walking around the garden during the day, you could see they were like lime green little bells, little balls that hung. They look like cherries, like in the sense that they hung from like a little stem,
ooh,
and then in the at the as the night the light got dimmer and dimmer, they did look like they glowed in the dark. So that was really interesting, I thought.
very neat.
Do you see that? Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. I quickly looked it up. Yes, the Japanese snowbells, Styrax japonicus.
There you go.
That's
There
right.
you go.
Yeah. So it looks like it's zone 6A,
Okay.
and growing in a few different sizes depending on where you are.
Hmm.
But up anywhere up to like 25 feet or 12 meters by.
Yeah, hers was, now she was in downtown Toronto. She was in like East York,
Right.
and yeah, I would say it was maybe 10 feet. So she had had it for a few years. So yeah, I mean, I think we have to be careful that the pendulum doesn't go too far. And if only the only tree, it's hard because I'm guilty of it myself. If people only have a 40 foot wide yard, I don't want to put two maple trees that are going to grow, too big for that space.
Yeah.
But yet, if we're only planting little trees, what about the urban canopy and
Yes.
the shade that those trees provide and what they provide for the environment when they are much bigger trunks? Because there's something so majestic about, and you just, any of our Toronto listeners, when you drive around, you see those massive tree trunks and those beautiful, graceful trees. If we're only planting, trees that are just going to get 15 feet, then what does the future hold for that? So
That's
yeah,
right.
so it's. I think we just have to split the difference somehow.
Yeah.
We can't swing in the pendulum too far.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
It makes me think of, I'm going to totally forget the term here. I don't know why. But I just read something where they were talking about trees and planting and the arrangement of trees. For the lack of a better word, but there is a better word, it's almost like a parquet that humans find it um, much more pleasant when there are larger trees spaced out with some flatter grassy or meadowy kind of like gardens or spaces with a few shrubs interspaced in between. So almost like a larger park that just, and I don't, yeah, man, that just, we like that kind of, that form, those
Mm.
bigger trees. There's a word for that type of
Yes.
tree,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
I'm
that's
totally
good.
blanking. But yeah, that they like that too. So don't forget about the big guys, strategically
Hmm.
planting some bigger ones, like you said, that urban canopy. That's very important.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Certainly not like 3 feet from the house, but
No,
the back of your property, the front of your property, as close to the city property as possible. They do offer the benefits of shading your tree, wind breaks in the winter. I mean, there are a lot of, trees.
heating and
Trees
cooling
are,
your house.
yep.
Yeah,
Definitely, trees are a big part of it. So yeah, so there we go. Is our Q&A 3-year episode, anniversary episode, all about trees and 3 years of Down the Garden Path. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this journey.
that's right. We hope you
Hmm.
join us for a few years more. That's right. Yeah. Thank you, John, Jack, Josh, Kim, Mick, Nan, Ralph, Sean, and Steve for writing in your questions. Thank you, everyone, for being with us for these 3 years, live and or on the podcast, if that's the only place you listen. And thank you for tuning in. Thanks, Gary, for helping us produce the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I think that's it.
There you go. Cue Gary. There you go. He's still there, everybody, even though we can't see him. So yeah, thank you. Please, again, search Down the Garden Podcast, Down the Garden Path Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, or on your favorite podcast app. You can visit our websites at downtoearth.ca, and all my social media links will be there. Matt, you are at Natural Affinity
Designs.ca.
Yeah, it's .ca.
That's right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of Down the Garden Path here on Reality Radio 101.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your host, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.